Grimnismal is a poetic explanation for how astronomy and constellations are used in the poetic Eddas. Grimnismal speaks of the two fostered sons of Odin and his wife Frigg, Garethar and Agnar. At the age of 8, Agnar is lost at sea after fishing with his brother. Garethar shunned his brother after making landfall. We cast our gaze to Frigg's distaff, or the Orion constellation, which can also be known as Fiskikarlar, the fisherman. Agnar, the lost fisherman, was Frigg's chosen foster son. After reaching maturity, Garethar becomes a king of the Goths and receives a surprise visit from his foster father, Odin, in the guise of Grimnir, or Shadowface. Odin confronts the cruelty of Garethar. Due to Odin's reluctance to reveal his true identity, he is tortured by 8 days between the blaze of two bonfires. Garethar named his son after his lost brother Agnar, and this son of Garethar visits Odin to give him mead and food. Odin bestows cosmic wisdom upon the young future Gothic king, detailing the gods and their dwelling places. Odin speaks.
I see a holy land which lies near those of the gods and elves, and that place, Thrúthheim, Thor will live till Ragnarok.
Thrúthheim means home of strength. Thrúthheim, according to Bjorn Johnson's interpretation of Grimnismal, is the Pisces constellation, with the two fish being equated to Thor's two goats who draw his chariots, as well as his servants, Thjalfi and Roskva. The constellation is heavily associated with Lokrur, an Icelandic mythological poem about Thor slaying the giant Uthgartha Loki, otherwise known as the giant Skrimnir. The world serpent Jormungandr is in the periphery of this constellation, which will eventually slay Thor. Next, Odin says,
Uller has built a hall for himself. Idler, they call it.
Uller is an alternative name for the god Heimdall, the guardian, who rules over late fall and winter months. As a great bowman and hunter, Idler means yew dale, with yew being the tree of death, with flexible wood, often used to fashion bows. Yew is equated with the Awaz rune. An old Saxon rune poem reads,
The yew is a tree rough with bark, hard and fast in the earth, supported by its roots, a guardian of flame and a joy on native land.
Idler, according to Bjorn Johnson, is interpreted as near the Aries constellation. Next, Odin states,
The gods gave Frey the land of Elfheim in ancient times.
Freyr is a fertility god associated near the Taurus constellation, or the primordial bull Athrumbla. Elfheim means home of the light elves. Odin continues,
A third home is there, with silver thatched. By the hands of the gracious gods, Valiskulolf is it, in days of old, set by a god for himself.
Valeskjalf means shelf of the slain. This is where Odin looks for Loki after the death of Balder. This area is also associated with the twin constellation Gemini. It is said Gemini could be the eyes of the giant Thjazi, which will come into play later in the sagas. Vidar and Vali are also associated with Gemini, which are Odin's sons who redeem him by slaying Fenrir during Ragnarok. One could also view the twins as Odin's twin brothers Vili and Ve, who created the world from the giant Ymir's body. So you have three potential stories to be told with this constellation, dependent on the story and time of year. Carrying on, Odin speaks.
A fourth hall, Sokvabekker, which cool waves crash upon, and amid their murmur it stands. There daily do Odin and Saga drink, in gladness from cups of gold.
Sokvabekkr means sunken bank or treasure bank. It is the dwelling place of Frigg, who is possibly referred to as Saga, a seeress as described in Loki's Flight or Lokasenna. The treasure being the summer solstice and spiritual gifts of Odin through the comprehension of these poetic Eddas.
A fifth land is Gladsheim, where gold bright Valhall stands.
This is where Odin chooses the men who are brought to Valhalla, although the next stanzas go on to describe Valhalla, held by spear shafts, roofed by shields. Chainmail is on the benches. A wolf hangs above the western door, and an eagle above him. This is not necessarily the hall of Valhalla itself, but more likely a mead hall during late summer, where Naglfar, the ship of the enemies of the gods, begins to rise from the horizon, leading into the fall months.
Thjazi, the mighty giant, once lived in the sixth hall, known as Thrymheim, and now Skathi, bright bride of the gods, lives in her father's old dwelling.
Skathi had to choose her husband by only examining their feet. This is in repayment of the death of her father, as aforementioned in the Gemini constellation, the Eyes of Thjazi. Skathi thought she chose Balder as her husband, but instead it was Njord of Noatun, god of the sea coast. The constellation Virgo is the Greek equivalent, and the area close by the Centaurus constellation can be viewed as Mimisbrunner or Mimir's Well, or Odin riding his eight-legged horse Sleipnir, another interpretation of Odin's sacrifice of hanging on the world tree to obtain the knowledge of the runes. Drasil is another word for horse.
Balder built himself a hall. It is called Breithablik. That's a place where I know you'll find little grief.
This is the Libra constellation, with the three brightest stars being the scales of Libra, or the three Norns. The wolf Fenrir is said to be nearby, being the Lupus constellation.
Heimdall inhabits the eighth hall, Himinbjorg. That is where the master of all guilds of men resides. And that pleasant house, the warder of heavens, drinks his good mead.
Himinbjorg translates as Heaven's Cliff. It is a watchtower where the Bifrost Rainbow Bridge represents our perception from Asgard, the realm of the gods, to Midgard, the realm of mortals. This is the sign Scorpio, although by this time Naglfar, the ship of the enemies, has been visible since July. Ginnungagap, the primordial void, is near this constellation, between Scorpio and Sagittarius. In reality, this is the galactic center. The entire band of the Milky Way can be thought of as Billrost, and there is a poetic distinction between the Bifrost Rainbow Bridge and Billrost, although they are thought as one and the same. You have a lot going on in this area, with Udrabrunner, the Norn Erd's well, discussed in the previous video, Yalarbru, the bridge to Hell, Valgrinder, the entrance to Valhall, Veirgelmir, Niflheim's well, and Nidhogg, the serpent gnawing at the roots of Yggdrasil.
Freya rules the ninth land, Folkvanger. That is where she arranges the seats. She chooses half the dead who die in battle, and Odin takes the other half.
Odin, however, gets first pick at those Einherjar, or chosen warriors, more cognate, raiders. Herja means to raid. The Sagittarius constellation can be thought of as Hrungnir's heart, a giant's heart made of stone, with the symbol of this story being the Valknut. Hrungnir is slain by Thor at Grotengard after losing a wager against Odin over whose horse was faster, Golfaxi or Sleipnir.
The tenth hall is Glitnir. with gold halls and a silver roof. The god named Forseti is there on most days, and he settles disputes.
Glitnir means one who shines. Forseti, god of law and justice. Gimli is thought of as the hall where those who survived Ragnarok dwell. This is the Capricorn constellation. The Mare's Heart is thought to be nearby the Equus constellation, where Loki took the form of a mare to seduce the giant Spadilfari to give birth to Odin's steed Sleipnir.
The 11th hall is Njord's, which he built and named Noatun. That flawless lord of men rules that high timbered temple.
Noatun means ship enclosure. Njord is a coastal god by the sea. Njordr is the husband of Skathi, and dwells here while she prefers to live in the mountains in nearby Thrymheim. You can begin to see how the constellations are not told in a linear fashion, but in a roundabout way, relating to the previous constellation as well as the progression of the poetic Eddas provides some explanation for the manner in which they are meant to be told and why the sagas skip around in time. Noatun can be compared to Aquarius, with Franangerfoss, a waterfall where Loki is subdued after the death of Balder, as well as Skidbleipnir, a ship built by Ivaldi's dwarven sons, which is the Pegasus constellation. But that is all for now, and hopefully, with an interpretation of Grimnismal, you can begin to see how myths are told in relation to the stars, and how they interrelate with other stories in the poetic Eddas.